Hi, my name is Nick, and this right here is the Ford Everest, and it's a body-on-frame four-wheel drive that seats 7 passengers. And whilst you can get a permanent four-wheel drive system in some of the entry-level grades with a 2-litre bi-turbo engine, the sport variant is the entry point to Ford's 3-litre V6, which is what customers seem to prefer. And today, on this cold winter's morning in the Southern Highlands, this is going to be a full, in-depth review of the Everest Sport. So before we start, please like, share, subscribe and hit that bell, and let's get straight into the review. Before we start, what are some of the key things that you need to know before you walk into a showroom? Firstly, the Ford Everest is the type of vehicle that you are going to compare with the Toyota Land Cruiser 250 Series Prado, the facelifted Isuzu MUX and the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport. And it is worth noting that the Ford Everest is available with a wide selection of models to choose from. And like I said, the version I'm featuring is the Everest Sport V6. And finally, when it comes to ownership, warranty, servicing and running costs, I've given you a quick breakdown on your screen right now. Right, moving on to styling. The front section gets LED lighting with LED DRLs, automatic high beam and an automatic function for the headlights, but unfortunately halogen bulbs for the indicators. But you do get LED fog lights down on that bottom section, and this being a sports variant, blacked out badging on the top section, a blacked out grille and lower sections as well. And when it comes to off-road driving, 2 recovery points and still underbody protection. And now moving on to the side view, the Sport features a set of gloss black 20-inch alloy wheels that are wrapped around in highway terrain tyres, but as a no-cost option, if you are going to go off-road, you can fit this with all terrains, and that is free of charge. And it's also nice to see front and rear disc brakes. And this, of course, being a Sport, blacked out door handles, mirror caps, V6 badging and roof rails. And finally, down the bottom, plastic side steps. And now coming to the rear design, at the back, LED lighting, but unfortunately halogen bulbs for those indicators. And whilst this does look like a light bar, it is just plastic with Everest badging engraved. And there's also more black plastic down the bottom here. So in my opinion, it does look a little bit plain, but you do get blacked out Sport badging. And before I forget, dark tinted privacy glass from B-pillar all the way to the back. And this being optioned with the touring package, you get a towing kit with an integrated trailer brake controller and a 360-degree camera system with dedicated views for your towing. So overall, a pretty cool package. And as always, let me know your feedback down in the comments below of what you think of the Everest. But for now, it's freezing cold. Let's now move on inside. And now, the interior. This features a remote key, keyless entry, and push button ignition on the steering column. And in terms of presentation, in my opinion, I think the 250 Series Prado does come across a bit nicer, whereas this is very much like the Ford Ranger Sport on which this is based on. Well, apart from the bigger screen and the fake wood grain with the ambient lighting, but overall it is much the same, so it does feel pretty durable when you slam the door. Up the top here is nice and squidgy, where you rest your elbow, and in the center as well. You also get a nice leather accented steering wheel that feels nice to grip onto. And up the top here, soft and squidgy, but when you do look over here, down here, and in the center, and over here as well, it does get a bit durable, but it's supposed to be a bit rugged. After all, it is a four-wheel drive capable family four-wheel drive. And what about comfort? You get dual zone climate control with physical buttons and dials, and also a dedicated climate menu within this infotainment. And this is where you activate the seat heating and ventilation. And the seats are finished off in synthetic leather with perforation in the center. And they also get electric seat adjustment with lumbar. There's also a seat memory function for the driver, and the steering column offers both manual, tilt and reach adjustment. And now moving on to infotainment, it all runs off this 12.4-inch touchscreen, and like I've said before in previous videos, it is a good multimedia system, and you can cycle between different menus up the top here. So overall, pretty straightforward. And in terms of key features, you've got inbuilt satellite navigation with 3D mapping, voice recognition, and if I go into radio, this has a 10-speaker sound system with AM, FM, DAB, USB, Bluetooth, and for smartphone integration, wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. There's also a sketchpad so you can draw things on the screen. And if I go into this menu, this is your zone lighting. So if I turn that on, that'll project lighting around the car at night. And as you can see, the car is connected. So this can run a Wi-Fi hotspot, and you can also download an app onto your phone to receive remote access to your car, like door locking and unlocking. And there are also software updates. And as part of the touring package, you get this integrated trailer brake controller. And if I click on this button here, that'll go into your trailer backup assist. And there's also a dedicated towing menu where you can perform a light check some of the connections, and you can also save those configurations within the system. And now, moving on to safety, you get a 360-degree camera system with multiple views and angles to choose from, and overall the picture quality looks pretty decent. And there are also dedicated camera angles for your towing. And in terms of other key features for safety, there are front and rear parking sensors, a rear cross traffic alert, autonomous emergency braking, and auto dimming rear view mirror, blind spot monitoring with a lane departure warning and a lane keeping assistant. And this also has the ability to steer itself within its lane. There's also adaptive cruise control that keeps you within distance between yourself and the vehicle in front, a speed limiter, speed sign recognition, and a driver fatigue monitoring system. And now moving on to this 8-inch screen ahead of the driver. As you can see, the layout isn't really all that configurable, but you can cycle between the menus looking at all of your key data such as fuel consumption, navigation, and there are also dedicated off-road menus and towing menus within this system. And for off-road driving, you've got a four-wheel drive selected down the bottom here. So for on-road driving, 2H and 4A, and for off-road, 4H and 4 low. And you can also cycle between the different drive modes between normal, eco, tow for on-road driving, slippery, mud and sand for off-road driving. And as you can see, that'll enable the four-wheel drive system to what it thinks it needs to be in, such as locking the rear differential for sand. And if I press this button, this is going to take you into a dedicated off-road menu, showing you a forward-facing camera with active guidelines. And from here, you can also switch on hill descent control and also enable the rear differential lock. Plus, there's also a detailed view of what is going on with the driveline, and you can also cycle between different information within that setup. And finally, storage. Up the top here, you've got a sunglasses holder, and on the doors, the pockets are pretty big, and that can also fit a bottle of water. There are two small cup holders in the center, and center storage is okay with this little bin and a 12-volt socket. You've also got a wireless phone charging pad in the center with a USB A and C port, a top mounted glove box up the top here with a decent sized glove box down the bottom here, and the pop-out cup holders on either side of the dashboard. Here in the second row with this seat set in my position, as you can see, I've got a decent amount of knee room, toe room, and there's also good headroom as well. There's also good headroom in the middle seat, and considering that you do have this driveline hump, again, good knee room and toe room. And you can also move the seats forwards and backwards, and also recline them backwards and forwards. Map pockets behind the front row seats with a USB A and C port, your fan speed dial for your roof mounted directional air vents, and there's also LED lighting, grab handles along here to make it easier climbing into the back seats. The door bins are also pretty decent, as that can fit a large water bottle. And over here is a flip down armrest with two small cup holders. And finally, for child seats, the two outboard seats are ISOFIX compatible, and right behind me, 3 top tether points. Here in the third row with this second row seat fixed slightly far forward, as you can see, knee room isn't too bad, but toe room is pretty cramped, and headroom is just okay. And it is worth pointing out that you cannot recline these third row seats backwards or forwards like you can do in some of the other rivals. So really, this third row setup is only suitable for children, and that is pretty much the same story with most body-on-frame 7-seaters. But for a short journey, anyone should be fine in the back here, as you do have directional air vents, roof mounted air vents, and there's also a coat hanger, LED lighting, a small cup holder off to the right hand side, and on the left hand side a 12-volt socket, another cup holder and a little bit of storage. But it is worth noting that these two outboard seats are not ISOFIX compatible, but there are two top tether points right behind me for the third row, which is something you don't get in most 7-seaters. Let's now talk about boot space. So the Everest Sport comes with an automatic power tailgate, and with the third row in place, there is enough room for a single or two carry-on suitcases or even a pram, and you can also fold down the third row seats quite easily by pulling on these levers, making the back section big enough for 2 or 4 large suitcases stacked up on top of each other. And to fold down the second row seats, you walk over to the back doors and fold those down quite easily. There is no surprise, that is going to make the back section very spacious. And for all the key specifications about boot volume, everything you need to know is on your screen. Now, in terms of other items to mention, you've got some shopping bag hooks, tie-down points to keep items secure, and under here, some underfloor storage to keep items hidden, and that is also where you are going to find the tyre repair kit and the jack, and in case you're wondering, a full-size spare tyre underneath the vehicle. Let's now talk about the powertrain. So under the bonnet of the Ford Everest Sport features a 3-litre turbocharged V6 diesel engine, which develops 184 kilowatts and 600 newton meters of torque, and this is all paired to a 10-speed automatic transmission and a full-time four-wheel drive system, along with a locking rear differential. And like the Ford Ranger, on which the Ford Everest is based on, this sits on a ladder frame chassis, so it is capable for off-road driving, but opposed to leaf springs at the back, the Everest features a core sprung setup. So on the road, it should drive a little bit better. And in terms of towing, everything you need to know about towing capabilities is on your screen right now. And finally, for off-roading, front and rear departure angles, and again, everything you need to know has been listed out on your screen right now. And I'm going to take this out off-roading, but what is it like on the road? Right behind the wheel inside the Ford Everest Sport V6. Over the bonnet there's great forward visibility and you do get a nice commanding driving position. Side vision is also good. You also get these big chunky wing mirrors. However, rear vision is okay, but you do get a good 360 camera, and thanks to the electric steering, the steering feel is nice and light, especially at low speeds. So driving around the city, this is nice and easy to live with. And if you do flick it around in the corners, you are going to expect some body roll, being based on a body on frame construction. So compared to your traditional front wheel drive or all wheel drive SUV, the Everest isn't going to be as dynamic, but when it comes to four wheel drive capability, it is fantastic. And you can also run the four wheel drive system into 4A for a sealed surface. So if you do need that added traction and that added grip on a wet road or a windy road around the countryside, you've got that security. Now, what's it like in here when it comes to refinement? Well, there is a little bit of wind noise coming into the cabin, a little bit of diesel roar, but nothing too outrageous. And like I said, thanks to the coil sprung suspension on all four corners, it's definitely a car that you can sit in for a couple of hours without stopping. The seats are a little bit on the firm side compared to what you'll find in a Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, but a lot more supportive compared to the Isuzu MUX. The brakes also have a really nice feel. They're nice and progressive thanks to the front and rear disc brakes. And when you put your foot down, this is a punchy V6 turbo diesel. It's got plenty of go, getting up to speed. And I did live with a Ford Ranger V6 over Christmas, and I thought it was a great car to drive around in, both for city driving and country driving. The only thing I wasn't so fond of was the 10-speed automatic transmission, because I think personally there are too many gears. But apart from that, overall, again, it is one of the best vehicles in the segment when it comes to driving and refinement. And what about driver assistance? Well, if I set the adaptive cruise control, all of that seems to work, especially on the freeway. I did drive this all the way from Sydney to the Southern Highlands, and the only thing I found annoying was the lane keeping assistant and the lane departure warning, but apart from that, everything seemed to work fine. And you can also turn that off quite easily by pressing that button, and that'll switch off. And finally, for fuel consumption, with a mixture of city driving, freeway driving and country driving, it is a pretty efficient engine, and it does sit low on the rev range thanks to that 10-speed gearbox. You can shift all the way into the high gear. And now time for some off-road driving. So I'm going to put the system into 4H out of 4A and see what it's like. So this road has a lot of dirt, a lot of gravel and some sharp edges, along with some muddy terrain. So yeah, perfect and appropriate enough for 4H. And you can also change the drive modes to whatever condition you are in. So we've got slippery, mud and sand, and that'll engage the four-wheel drive system to what it thinks it needs to be in. But what I'll do, I'll just leave it into its normal setting with 4H enabled. So going over these lumps and bumps, pretty seamless and pretty easy to do if you are new to off-road driving. And we're coming up to a little bit of wet sand, but it's not too soggy. There aren't any puddles today going down this dip. A little bit too much power, but pretty nice stuff. And going over really harsh bumps, you will notice compared to the standard Ranger, this does ride a lot better. As I said, this does feature the coil sprung suspension setup on all four corners. So it is nice and composed, and yeah, if you bring the family along, it's a nice comfortable cruiser off-road as well. And right now we're currently driving on gravel, so at the moment quite composed and a few vibrations there, driving at 35 kilometers, but yeah, overall pretty good. And with my driving impressions out of the way, let's now wrap up with a final verdict. So what is my final verdict on the Ford Everest Sport? Well, if I was serious about off-roading, I would spend a little bit more money and get myself into the Tremor, because as a family off-road vehicle, that is a fantastic car. But if I wasn't so fussed about the V6 and I wanted a bit of value, the Trend is definitely the sweet spot within the range. But tell me what you think. Would you go for this, another model grade, or something completely different? Let me know your feedback, and I will see you in the next film, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. See you next time.